So much for coming out on this frosty night. As Teresa said, my name is Victoria Samson. I'm the Washington Office Director of the Secure World Foundation. First, I'd like to start by thanking PSSI and College University for inviting me the first chance to come to Prague. I'm super excited to get to talk to you. And I got here early, so I got to explore that, so that was nice. The Secure World Foundation is a private operating foundation that promotes cooperative solutions for space sustainability. Our vision is to secure, sustainable, and peaceful use of outer space that contributes to global stability on Earth. Our mission is that we work with governments, industry, international organizations, and civil society to develop and promote ideas and actions for international collaboration that achieve the secure, sustainable, and peaceful use of outer space. I'm based in DC, our headquarters in Colorado. I would say right now, everyone always wants to know where's our funding come from. We're kind of unusual for an NGO, our funding comes from an individual donor. Our husband put a lot of money into real estate, and she wanted to put the money towards something that she thought would be good for the human kind. And she identified space as an issue area that affects all the time, but it's irrelevant. But it also comes across a lot of different policy issues. So we focus on all space all the time. So stability really rests upon the reliable, predictable access to space. There's lack of clarity in causing satellite capabilities disappear, and if there's hostilities on the ground, there might be misunderstandings and misperceptions of what's going on. I think you guys are familiar, I'm sure if you do the space security course, you're familiar with all this, and forgive me if I'm saying something you already know. But a lot of people that I talk to who are not familiar with space, they always think of, there's the equivalent of air traffic control for space, and that someone somewhere is watching a screen with these moving dots, and they're keeping track of satellites and know exactly where they are at all points. That's not how this works. Basically, a satellite is launched, they watch it, based on its speed and based on its altitude, and based on historical analysis, we think it's going to be at this point, at this point. At that point in that time, they check and they see, okay, is it there? Great. If not, okay, we already do our calculations. So there's not a lot of situational awareness. Oftentimes, if a satellite doesn't work, or something happens, they're not entirely sure, was it because it's deliberately interfered with? Was it because there was a solar flare? Was it because someone forgot to carry the tube when they're doing the math and the original design phase? So it's really hard to say. And so it's prime for misunderstanding, and that's why the work we do really focuses on making sure there's clarity, at least as much transparency as possible. I'll be talking a couple different things, as Teresa said. Secure World Foundation recently put out a counter-space threat assessment, so I'll be going into that in a little bit of detail. And then I'll have a larger discussion about just overall issues that are affecting the space domain and affecting overall security and stability in space. And I will be discussing the Space Force because there's no escaping the Space Force. So the space domain is undergoing a significant set of changes. A growing number of countries and commercial actors are getting involved in space, resulting in more innovation and benefits on Earth, but also more congestion and competition in space. From a security perspective, an increasing number of countries are looking to use space to enhance their national security and their military capabilities. The growing use of and reliance on space for national security has also led to more countries look at developing their own counter-space capabilities that can be used to deceive, disrupt, deny, degrade, or destroy space systems. The existence of counter-space capabilities is not new, but the circumstances surrounding them are. Today, there are increased incentives for development and potential use of offensive counter-space capabilities. There are also greater potential consequences from their widespread use that could have global repercussions well beyond the military, as huge parts of the global economy and society are increasingly reliant on space applications. So the report that we put together, it came out in April of this year, is available on our website for free. Compiled and assessed publicly available material on the counter-space capabilities being developed by multiple countries across 5 categories: direct ascent, co-orbital, electronic warfare, directed energy, and cyber. It assessed the current and near-term future capabilities for each country, as long as with a potential military utility. The too long to read version of our report is that evidence shows there is significant research and development for a broad range of kinetic, i.e. destructive, and non-kinetic counter-space capabilities in multiple countries. However, only non-kinetic capabilities are actively being used in current military operations. Let me repeat that. I want this to be your takeaway, if nothing else. Non-kinetic, that means radio frequency interference, that means electronic warfare, that means cyber attacks. Those are the only active counter-space capabilities being actively used at this point. And I looked at a little bit into why together this assessment. If you read a lot about what's happening now, you may hear, oh, there's an arms race going on in space. There's a lot of discussions about what China is up to, what Russia's up to. And for us, it's really frustrating because we kind of fell into two categories in this issue when we try to talk to policymakers. One, they would have no idea what's going on, and they would just follow hyperbolic discussions, and, which is really not helpful, because basically it implies, if you read the more, I hate to say hysterical, but let's say exuberant articles about it, it implies that Russia and China are holding ahead, the United States and its allies are being left behind, and we're being stockbrokers and we have to do something. The other side of the coin is that because space is so highly classified, any discussion on space security is very difficult for policymakers to discuss in open source materials. It just gets classified almost immediately. I used to work on nuclear weapons issues, and let me tell you, space is more classified than nukes, which is really kind of surprising for me. And so what we wanted to do is say, okay, what do we actually know, and what don't we know, and where are the gaps in our knowledge? And so we did this, I don't have clearance, my colleagues have clearance, we hired a bunch of experts, but we worked with a bunch of experts to work on various aspects of this issue, with the idea that we would try and say, what can you actually prove? If you know where to look, and you know how to research, and you know what this stuff means, from an open source perspective, what can you actually prove is actually happening? Just so you get an idea of contextualizing what do we actually know is going on. And then you can have a more thorough discussion later on of what the actual policy implications are. So that was really our goal when we were trying to put this report together. So I'll be going just really quickly, country by country. We looked at China, Russia, the United States, Iran, India, North Korea, and then did a little discussion about CIDR. So China. The evidence strongly indicates that China has a sustained effort to develop a broad range of counter-space capabilities. China has conducted multiple tests of technologies for close approach and rendezvous in both low Earth orbit, or LEO, and geosynchronous orbit, or GEO, that could lead to a co-orbital ASAP capability. Just so you guys know what co-orbital means, right? No? Okay. For those who maybe don't, co-orbital is just the idea something gets a close approach to something else and gets near it. So a satellite gets near a satellite. In theory, it could be inspecting, it could be trying to broadcast something, it could be possibly trying to interfere. It could just be, it could be used just in a benign. There's a lot of technologies that we're going to a little bit, like on-orbit servicing, where you're trying to refuel satellites, that obviously could be benign, but it depends on what's going on. So China is developing multiple tests of technologies that could lead to co-orbital ASAP capability. However, as of yet, the public evidence concludes that they have not conducted an actual destructive intercept of a target from a co-orbital test. There is no proof that these rendezvous proximity technologies are definitively being developed for counter-space use, as opposed to intelligence gathering or other purposes. China has at least one, and possibly as many as 3 programs underway to develop a direct descent anti-satellite capability, i.e. a kinetic anti-satellite attack, either as a dedicated counter-space system or as part of its mid-course missile defense systems that could provide counter-space capabilities. China has engaged in multiple progressive tests of these capabilities since 2005, indicating serious organizational effort. Chinese direct descent ASAC capability against low Earth orbit targets is likely mature and may be operationally fielded on mobile launchers within the next few years. Chinese direct descent ASAC capability against deep space targets, both in medium Earth orbit and GEO, is likely still in the experimental or developmental phase, and there is not sufficient evidence to conclude whether it will become an operational capability in the near future. Although official Chinese statements on space warfare and weapons have remained consistently aligned to the peaceful uses of outer space, privately they become more nuanced. China has recently designated space as a military domain, and military writings state that the goal of space warfare and operations is to achieve space superiority using offensive and defensive means in connection with a broader strategic focus on asymmetric cost and position, access denial, and information dominance. That said, it is unclear whether China would fully utilize its offensive counter-space capabilities in a future conflict, or whether the goal is to use them as a deterrent against U.S. aggression. There is no public evidence of China actively using counter-space capabilities in current military operations. Moving on, Russia. There is strong evidence that Russia has embarked on a set of programs over the last decade to regain some of its Cold War-era counter-space capability. Since 2010, Russia has been testing technologies for close approach and rendezvous in both LEO and GEO that could lead to a co-orbital ASAT capability. And some of those efforts have links to a Cold War-era LEO co-orbital ASAT program. However, the technologies could also be used for non-aggressive applications, and the R-number testing to date does not conclusively prove they have for an ASAT program. Russia is almost certainly capable of some limited direct-to-send ASAT operations, but likely not yet on a sufficient scale or at a sufficient altitude to pose a critical threat to U.S. space assets. And I apologize, but to be honest, we wrote this for U.S. policymakers, so we're always looking at what is a threat to the United States. Core Russian direct-to-send ASAT capabilities are not yet operational, and those currently in development are not yet planned to have the capability of threatened targets beyond LEO. Russia does appear highly motivated to continue development efforts even beyond LEO, where military utility is questionable, due at least to part bureaucratic pressures. Russia places a high priority on integrating electronic warfare into military operations and has been investing heavily in modernizing its capability. Most of the upgrades have focused on multifunction tactical systems whose counter-space capability is limited to jamming user terminals within tactical ranges. Russia has a multitude of systems that can jam GPS receivers within a local area, potentially interfering with the guidance of unmanned area vehicles, guided missiles, and precision-guided munitions, but has no publicly known capability to interfere with GPS satellites themselves using radio frequency interference. The Russian Army fields several types of mobile electronic warfare systems, some of which can jam specific satellite communications user terminals within tactical ranges. Russia can likely jam communication satellite uplinks over a wide area from fixed ground stations facilities, and Russia has operational experience in the use of counter-space electronic warfare capabilities from recent military campaigns. Russia has a strong technical knowledge base in directed energy physics and is developing a number of military applications for laser systems in a variety of environments. Russia has revived and continues to evolve a legacy program whose goal is to develop an aircraft-borne laser system for targeting the optical sensors of imaging reconnaissance satellites, although there is no indication that operational capability has yet been achieved. Although they're not their intended use, Russian ground-based satellite laser ranging facilities could be used to dazzle the sensors of optical imagery satellites. There is no indication that Russia is developing or intends to develop high-power space-based laser weapons. Russian military thinkers see modern warfare as a struggle over information dominance and net-centric operations that can often take place in domains without clear boundaries or contiguous operating areas. To meet the challenge posed by space aspect of modern warfare, Russia is pursuing lofty goals of incorporating electronic warfare capabilities throughout its military, both to protect its space-enabled capabilities and deny or degrade capability to adversaries. In space, Russia is seeking to mitigate the superiority of U.S. space assets by fielding a number of ground, air, and space-based offensive capabilities. Other technical challenges remain. The Russian leadership has indicated that Russia will continue to seek parity in the United States in space. Next, the United States. And we really want to make sure we included the United States in this assessment, just because we wanted to make sure that people reading this got a full picture, a holistic picture of what counter-space capabilities were globally. We were worried that it would make it difficult for policymakers to read it. They might be critical of it. But actually, we've been told it's been helpful because it puts in one place an unclassified summary of what the U.S. is doing. So the United States has conducted multiple tests of technologies for close approach and rendezvous in both low Earth orbit and GEO, along with tracking, targeting, and intercept technologies that could lead to a co-orbital ASAT capability. These tests and demonstrations were conducted for other non-offensive missions, such as missile defense, on-orbit inspections, and satellite servicing. The United States does not have an acknowledged program to develop co-orbital capabilities. However, the United States does possess the technological capability to develop that in a short period of time should it choose to do so. While the United States does not have an operational acknowledged direct-to-send ASAT capability, It does have operational mid-course missile defense interceptors that have been demonstrated in an ASAT role against low LEO satellites. The United States has developed dedicated direct-to-send ASATs in the past, both conventional and nuclear-tipped, and likely possesses the ability to do so in the near future, should it decide to do so. The United States has an operational electronic warfare counter-space system called the Counter Communication Systems, which can be deployed globally to provide uplink jamming capability against geostationary communication satellites. The U.S. likely has the capability to jam global navigation satellite service receivers, GPS, GLONASS, BeiDou, within a local area of operation to prevent their effective use by adversaries. In addition to interfering with adversary use of satellite navigation, the Navigation Warfare Program seeks to assure the availability of GPS services to U.S. military units and operations. The effectiveness of measures to counter adversarial GPS jamming and spoofing operations is not known. The United States has established doctrine and policy on counter-space capabilities for several decades, although not always publicly expressed. Most U.S. presidential administrations since the 1960s have directed or authorized research and development of counter-space capabilities, and in some cases, green-lit testing for operational deployment of counter-space systems. These capabilities have typically been limited in scope and designed to respond to a specific military threat, rather than be used as a broad, coercive, or deterrent threat. U.S. military doctrine for space control includes defensive counterspace, offensive counterspace control, and is supported by space situational awareness. Since 2014, U.S. policymakers have placed an increased focus on space security and have increasingly talked publicly about preparing for a potential war in space, speaking openly about space being a warfighting domain. This rhetoric has been accompanied by a renewed focus on reorganizing national security space structures and increasing the resilience of space systems. It is possible that the United States has begun the development of a new offensive counterspace capability, although there is no publicly available policy or budget direction to do so. The United States also continues to hold annual space war games and exercises that increasingly involve close allied and commercial partners. Like I said, I'll talk in a few minutes about the Space Force. Iran. Iran has a nascent space program building and launching small satellites that have limited capability. Technologically speaking, it is unlikely Iran has the capability to build on-orbit or direct-to-send ASAT capabilities, and little military motivations to do so at this time. But Iran has definitely demonstrated electronic warfare capability to persistently interfere and jam with commercial satellite systems, although the capability against military signals is difficult to ascertain. North Korea. North Korea has no demonstrated capability to mount kinetic attacks on U.S. space assets, neither a direct-to-send ASAT nor a co-orbital system. In its official statements, North Korea has never mentioned anti-satellite operations or intent, suggesting there is no clear doctrine and Pyongyang's thinking about it. North Korea does not appear motivated to develop dedicated counter-space systems, although certain capabilities in the ballistic missile program might eventually be evolved for such a purpose. It is unlikely that North Korea would use one of its few nuclear weapons as an electromagnetic weapon. North Korea has definitely demonstrated the capability to jam civilian GPS signals within a limited geographical area. The capability against military GPS signals is not known. There has been no demonstrated ability of North Korea to interfere with satellite communications, although again, the technical capability remains unknown. India. India has over 5 decades of experience in space capabilities, but most of that has been civil in focus. It was only within the past several years that India has started organizationally making way towards military become active users of and creators of its space capabilities. India's military has been developing an indigenous missile defense program and has a strong ballistic missile program that its supporters argue could provide a latent ASAT capability should the need arise. This capability has not been tested. It is possible that India would move to rapidly testing an anti-satellite weapon if it felt the international community was getting close to creating a national legal regime for banning kinetic ASAT weapons. Or ASAT tests, actually. Otherwise, given the substantial investment the Indian military is making in its satellite capacity and the income that India receives from launching other countries' satellites, it is unlikely that they will move to actively create an active counter space program. And then finally, cyber. Countries possess cyber capabilities that could be used against space systems. However, actual evidence of cyber attacks in the public domain are limited. The United States, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran have all demonstrated the ability and the willingness to engage in offensive cyber attacks against non-space targets. Additionally, a growing number of non-state actors are actively probing commercial satellite systems and discovering cyber vulnerabilities that are similar in nature to those found in non-space systems. This indicates that manufacturers and developers of space systems may not have reached the same level of cyber readiness as other sectors. So in terms of cyber attacks, space capabilities have become, as I said, an attractive target for counter-space weapons. This is because kinetic attacks are seen as less likely option. If you guys know cyber warfare, it's extremely plausible to deny anything, whether you did it, whether it came from your territory, whether anything actually happened. If you launch a missile, it's pretty clear you just trace it back and figure out where it came from. We've had wargaming discussions we've had tabletop exercises where we discuss, okay, what would be the tipping point from hostilities on the ground to hostilities in space. And it's always to the point where people say, I can't use space weapons because they're so inflammatory. Cyber, though, hey, that's great, let's use that. It's a totally tool that we can use. Which, in one way, yes, you don't want to be creating large amounts of debris in orbit. But the problem is the laws of armed conflict for space are very unclear. The concepts of laws of armed conflict, the idea of distinction between civil and military assets. What's the proper, appropriate response? How do you figure out what the red lines are? None of those have really been worked out for space yet. There have been discussions, you have laws of armed conflict for air, and for ground, and for sea, even for cyber. But the international law and military reasons for engaging are still being worked out. There's a couple, I won't say competing, I will say complementary efforts to create a sort of manual for laws of armed conflict in space. One of them is called MILIMOS. It's the Manual of International Law applicable to military use in space. It's coming out of McGill University in Canada. The other one is called the Woomera Manual. Woomera is a rocket launch facility in Australia, and it's coming out from the University of Adelaide. So they're working together to try and come up over the next couple of years the idea of crystallizing some of the thinking about laws of armed conflict in space. Full disclosure, secure rules involve both of them. But in the meantime, we stand a real chance of events, I won't say on the ground, but in space getting ahead of some of the policy and legal issues. And so possible cyber attacks for space can include things like jamming, spoofing, attacks on ground infrastructure. As I said, it can be done by state and non-state actors. We've seen interference with satellites. NOAA very famously has interference with its satellites. The problem we run into is that a lot of satellite operators don't like to say there's been interference with their assets just because it's kind of awkward for their customers. And so, it's difficult to be open. Intelsat's one of the key satellite operators that is pretty clear about what they do for cyber, and they say they spend about 5% of their budget in cybersecurity. I'll go into a little bit more about, basically the concept of new entrants to space. But there's all sorts of new users to space, all sorts of new actors in space, which is great. Space is becoming much more accessible to all. But these new entrants in space also mean that there's new entry points for attacks. There's a blurring of lines between different types of satellites, meaning it's hard to ensure resiliency. Many satellites are old and based on older technology. Some of these satellites, especially like the US GPS system, they're 15, 20 years old. They were designed 15, 20 years before that. Think about what cybersecurity was back in the 80s. It's an entirely different game now. There's an increased use of commercial off-the-shelf capabilities. That also allows possible points of entry. And with the Internet of Things, which doesn't happen yet, but could be coming, that means that there are many more devices that could be connected again, so these are more entry points. These are just concerns. A lot of satellite operators are trying to say, okay, cybersecurity needs to be a foundation for our work. We really need to focus on this. So next we'll discuss the changing nature of the space domain a little bit, and then some of the challenges that this is offering to space security and stability. As I said, space is increasingly being incorporated in national security and how the economy functions as a whole. So it's not just even an interruption to space assets, but the possibility of interruption is considered to be extremely inflammatory, and it has potential for inadvertent escalation. There There are new actors. Space used to be primarily, I wouldn't say the United States and Russia, but it was a handful of countries that were active in space. Now there are over 70 countries that are owners or operators of space assets. And that's great. That's opening things up, and that does, we're going from a bipolar to multipolar world. It does change things a bit. And again, I don't want the takeaway to be like, oh, there's new actors coming in space and now they're running for everyone. Clearly, that's not my remark. I'm just saying things are changing. When there's change, there's disruption. And disruption means that, for lack of better term, it's destabilizing. No judgment, just saying that we need to rethink how we've been approaching these things. There is a rise of small sats. That's part of the emerging actors. Satellites are getting a lot smaller. They're cheaper to launch, which is great. I mean, you hear stories about elementary schools launching satellites off the space station, which is awesome. But it does provide some concerns. There's two classes of problems for small sats. One, there's a collision risk and long-term debris growth, which is not a challenge to operators now, but could be in the future. But there is short-term impact on other operators, which could be a challenge. And so you say, okay, what kind of mission success requirements do we need? Do we need the kind to successfully operate? Or do we need the kind to actually make sure we don't interfere with other people's ability to utilize space? There is concern about small satellites possibly being too small to track, and they're getting smaller and smaller. There is no actual standard thinking about how you're supposed to make your satellite visible. The U.S. military tracks everything currently, and I'll go into a little bit more later on about how that may be changing. But they like to see things. They do it as part of the public good, and that it's a matter of public safety. You know, things smashing into each other because one country or one user's mistake in space can affect everyone's ability to utilize space. And so there are discussions now. Maybe we need to have, when satellites are launched, we need to have, I don't know, some sort of something that's visible on it, or some sort of tracker or something that broadcasts it and figure it out. But they're still figuring it out. And I will say, I probably should have started the numbers, but right now there's about 1,800 active satellites currently. We'll see what ends up happening, but there's also, the U.S. military is tracking another like 23,000 pieces of debris that's big enough to see, that they can see it's about 10 centimeters in diameter, but they figure there could be a couple 100,000 to 500,000 smaller pieces of debris. And again, at the speeds that they're going, it doesn't have to be very big to be deadly. So that's why the concern is about something being too small to track. It is a huge challenge from a traffic management or space traffic management perspective. One example, for the United States, if you want to launch a satellite, you have to get various licenses. You have to talk to the FAA about launching, you have to talk to NOAA if they're going to have any kind of camera taking pictures. And you have to talk to the FCC, the Federal Communication System. They're the ones that do broadcasts, but so you talk about spectrum management type issues. But the FCC also, you talk to them about, okay, what's my end-of-life plan? So there's a problem that we had, and you guys heard about Swarm earlier this year. In January 2018, Swarm, a company, a new space company, had secured a spot on an Indian rocket, the PSLV, for the launch of its product that set us 4 small satellites nicknamed the Space Bees. The Space Bees are prototypes for Swarm's plan to provide internet access to areas without it. The FCC actually had denied Swarm's request to launch the Space Bees at the end of 2017. They said it's too small, space fans can't track it, or the space band can't track it, so no, we can't launch it. Swarm went ahead and launched the Space Bees anyway, which is completely unprecedented. It was the first time there was a launch of a U.S. company, a commercial satellite, without permission from federal regulators. So this was kind of shocking for the space community in general. The FCC ordered Swarm to cease transmissions. They did an investigation. The way that Swarm got the spot on Indian vehicles, they went to like a rideshare broker, and the rideshare broker said, "Hey, we were told that they had their, that they had the licensing and the regulations." And the Indians were like, "We didn't, do anything illegal. We don't answer the U.S. FCC." But everyone was really embarrassed because this does not look good. So there's a question about concerns about governmental objects in your orbit, and the idea of how do you regulate all these new launches and how do you regulate all these new changes. There's also a new upcoming thing is mega-constellations. Right now, as I said, there's about 1,800 active satellites. Right now, does anyone know what the biggest constellation is in orbit? It's a new space actor, planet. They've got basically satellites that are about the size of your cell phone. They've got 190 of them, taking pictures and selling them images. They have a really high revisit rate, I think once a day, or at least about an hour. But they're just the tip of the iceberg. In theory, if you want to have a satellite, you have to go to the FCC and you have to do filings, you have to get the spectrum. If you look at filings to the FCC, in theory, there could be, and it changes every time I read about this, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 more satellites over the next 10 years. So think about it, we're going from 1,800 to possibly 20,000 more satellites for the pace of the decade. I mean, even if not all of them launch, and I'm pretty sure not all of them will launch, but even if just say a third of them do, I mean, you're basically, that's an exponential increase in how many more satellites there are. It's a huge challenge. And so the question is, okay, well, how do you deal with all that in the space traffic management industry? How do you deal with all that in terms of spectrum management? How do you deal with that just in terms of launching? You know, how do you deal with dealing with air traffic control? It's going to be a huge concern. And then how do you make sure, you know, let's say right now you launch 1,000 satellites and there's a 5% failure rate, you know, once you're on orbit. That's a lot of satellites. How are you going to get rid of them? What if there's a problem you don't find out until you launch it and the entire 1,000 is out because there's some sort of institution or some inherent engineering problem? So there's some real concerns about these constellations. Doesn't mean they can't be done and can't be worked with. They definitely need to be thought about because it really does change the game. But in addition to concerns about technical concerns with mega-constellations, one of the things I keep emphasizing when I talk about mega-constellations, you know, space used to be inherently done by nation-state actors. It was governments, it was countries involved in space, national space agencies, militaries, scientific organizations, but they were all nation-state in nature. These mega-constellations, it's not the United States launching them, it's not Russia launching them, it's not any country launching them, it's commercial entities launching them, which means space is going to be going to an inherently commercial domain, which has huge implications in terms of how do you ensure national security concerns when there's a commercial sector primarily involved with it. Now I'll go into it a little bit more later on. The big concern you have is, okay, when you talk about these international discussions about how do you work in a common area, typically we go through multilateral organizations which are state-based. But the United Nations, by its very nature, has a nation-states get involved and deal with all commercial actors. How do you make sure the actual stakeholders are involved in discussions that affect security and stability? But I'll go into that a little bit more in a bit. So there's concerns about, as I said, the technical issues. There's concern about it's changing the commercial entity, but also right now the U.S. military keeps trying to everything what's going on, and they send out potential introduction warnings as in potential close approaches. If you have a sudden increase in mega-constellations, and the U.S. military has a new radar coming on the space bands in the next year or so, which is to really increase its ability to detect and say what things up on orbit, there's going to be tons and tons and tons of conjunction messages. So if you're an operator, you're getting, you know, tens of thousands of messages a day about a possible close approach. How useful is that information? How can you make sure you know what the right warnings are that you need to act on, and the rest are just stuff you can ignore? It's going to be a real challenge. There have been some, the idea of debris mitigation and remediation is a growing problem. As I mentioned before, there's maybe up to 500,000, possibly more pieces of debris out of orbit. And some of it's, you know, the concern is how do you deal with it? Do you deal with the big pieces? They're easy to get to, but maybe that's the most threatening. Do you deal with the smaller shoes? Do you do stuff at LEO? The problem is a lot of the debris is at LEO, but there's no commercial case for doing LEO because a lot of the commercial investments in GEO. So you say, well, who's going to take care of it? And the other issue you run into, a lot of the debris on orbit is spent Russian rocket tanks, and so you'd be okay if the Russians going to do it? Would they be okay if the United States took them down? Probably not. It becomes proprietary and national security issue, and so there's real concerns. So there have been some attempts to deal with debris in terms of mitigation, i.e. not creating a large amount of debris in the first place. There's a thing called the Interagency Space Debris Coordinating Committee, or IADC. They created debris on guidelines on debris mitigation over the past couple of years. It was posted to the UN. It's based on 13 space agencies' best practices: U.S., Russia, Canada, I think ESA, JAXA, Canada, the Japan Space Agency, Canada. So they've been doing some stuff, but it's not enough. And they say, okay, well, if you're going to, if mitigation is enough, maybe you do mediation, i.e. actually take down pieces of debris after debris removal. There are tons and tons and tons of different technologies being developed. There are a lot of people in the space community, they all have their own pet project and way of doing this. From a technological standpoint, I mean, it depends how it might work out. But the policy and legal issues are really challenging just because if you get close to debris to take it down, you get close to a satellite to take it down as well. And so it becomes, I mean, the thing with space, it's always just a matter of, it's not the technology that's threatening, it's a matter of intent. Like I said, I used to work on nuclear issues, and so when you work on nuclear control, if you don't want people to get nuclear weapons, what do? You just make sure they don't get access to fissile material. Done. But with space, you don't have that as an option. The technology is a technology. It can be threatening, it can be beneficial, it can be neutral. And so you say, how do you develop the intent? So that's a bit of a challenge that we've been discussing. Some new areas, new use of space is outpacing policy. Rendezvous and proximity operations, that's when you actually get close to when vehicles, as I said, to try and, whether you're on road service, i.e. put more fuel or try and fix something that's broken, or there's all sorts of plans out, maybe sticking a new motor on the satellite that's burned out so you can try and get more life out of it. So there's a lot of these sort of things that are being developed. As I said, though, anything get close to the satellite to help it can also get close to interfere with it. So actually, DARPA has put together a thing called Consortium for, let me make sure I got this right. I always get that wrong. It's a consortium for, it's converse, it's titled the Execution of Rendezvous and Servicing Proximity Operations. What's embarrassing that Secure World is a sub of this contract. Clearly, I don't work on this contract. But the idea is that DARPA wanted to get the commercial sector together to come up with best practices for rendezvous and proximity operations, with the idea that they would kind of put down what's being done, and then that would make it more acceptable for other people to work on in the future. I'm getting near time, so I'm just going to skip ahead of some things. I mean, one of the main things that also countries are liable for, and this is part of the discussion about new space capabilities, I think some countries aren't aware, or they tend to forget, actually regulation of space activities is an international legal obligation if you sign an outer space treaty, and most countries have. Our Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty says, state parties to the treaty shall bear international responsibility for national activities in outer space, whether such activities are carried by governmental agencies or by non-governmental entities. Any kind of non-governmental activity requires authorization and continuing supervision by the appropriate state party. And so, even if it's just some new space actor working out of their garage, that country is responsible. It's either the country that it's launched from, or that the people working on, or that they're responsible for it. So that's one of the things that when we talk about this, a lot of countries aren't aware of that response. Space Force. So this has been an issue that's been talked about for some time. And how do we, within the U.S. national security establishment, the Air Force is the primary owner of space in terms of acquisition, in terms of developing, and that sort of thing. Not the primary user of space, that would be the U.S. Army, but they're the primary owner of space. And there's been a debate going on for literally decades now. How do we make sure that space is actually being represented? Because right now it's competing against Air Force priorities. Air Force likes to fly planes. That's their priority. They're not as excited about satellites. And so there's been discussion for some time about what do we do, what's the best way to handle it? Do we have some sort of space corps, kind of based like the Marine Corps? Do we have a space guard, kind of based on the Coast Guard? Do we have a space force? Do we have a space command? Actually, we did have a space command, we got rid of it in 2002. But in June of 2018, President Trump said, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a space force with the 6th branch of the armed forces. This was a bit of a surprise to the military leaders. This had been discussed, and they're actually undertaking, the Pentagon's undertaking an assessment that's actually due at the end of this calendar year, so it's not even done yet, to kind of look at various options. But, you know, once the president says it's happening, you're like, oh, well, we've been told. So it's a bit of a challenge, though, because the Air Force, again, was not happy about it. The military in general was not super thrilled about it. And actually, the president cannot, the mayor system said that the president cannot actually create a separate branch of the military. Congress can do that. They have to authorize the funding. And Congress sort of doesn't, maybe kind of does, you know, depending who you talk to. The House wants one thing, Senate wants another. So it's confusing as to what's going to happen. The Secretary of the Air Force at first said, oh, we're actually going to be investing in this. And then a few months ago, she came out with a cost that said it's going to be $13 million additionally over 5 years. And a lot of people thought, okay, maybe you're just exaggerating things a little bit, you don't actually want it. A recent assessment from a colleague at the Center for Strategic International Studies, Todd Harrison, who does monetary analysis, he came out with a study just a couple weeks ago and said, okay, actually, more likely it's going to be maybe $1.5 billion to $2 billion more over 5 years, which granted is a lot of money, but U.S. military, that's just around the air. So there's a big debate going on currently, but right now, you know, the U.S. military, they said, being told by Energy, you have to come up with the idea of this, and they're working on it. But then Congress has to authorize it, and so I think there's going to be a big fight as we see the next budget request coming out, which is going to be happening in February. So I shall go very quickly over multilateral fora. As I mentioned before, there's a very stage-centric approach. The UN, when they discuss space, they kind of split up into 2 different categories. The UN Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space, and the UN Composition Summit. The UN Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space, or COPUS, they've been working for the past 8 years on long-term sustainability guidelines, basically bottom-up discussions about best practices to ensure that space is usable for a long time. They finally agreed after 8 years, 21 of them in June. You know, and again, this is a feature, it's not a bug, it's meant to go slowly. And the COPUS is a consensus-driven organization, which means that all currently now, the this year, over 92 countries have to agree this is what they want, no one can be against it. So that was good. We'll see what happens in terms of carrying it out. One of the problems we're running into is that for space security, COPUS is very much made for civil space. We don't do security space. The part of the UN that deals with security base is the composite disarmament. Composite disarmament based in Geneva is also a consensus-driven organization, which means they have to agree on what their agenda is going to be, and then they have to agree on the issues that they're talking about. The last time the UN Composite Disarmament agreed on an agenda was back in the mid-90s. So it's been difficult because where you can talk about space security, the place to do it really can't agree on it. Over the past year, strangely enough, there's been an unplugging of discussions. The Composite Disarmament in February of this year agreed to form 4 subsidiary bodies to deal with the individual agenda items in absence of an overall work plan. And one of them was a team to look at prevention of arms race in outer space. They've been working on a report that they got consensus on, but they couldn't agree to send it to the GA. It's a matter of public record, so you know, the UN is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. In December of 2017, the UNGA asked the Secretary General to form a group of technical experts on further practical measures on the prevention of arms race in outer space. The GGE was a very UN thing. Basically, the Secretary General picks 15. The Permanent Biosecurity Council plus 10 regionally disparate representable countries get together and they have discussions on an issue and they give a report to the Secretary General. It's a consensus report, so sometimes they don't come to consensus. So these come to consensus, it's a terrible report, and this kind of consensus is a good report. This GGE is actually surprising because, as I said, normally there are 15 members, there's 25. It's extremely interesting. They've had 1 meeting so far, they'll have another meeting this spring. They're hoping to have some sort of discussion about transparency and confidence building measures. We'll see what ends up happening with that. And then finally, the UN Disarmament Commission, which is part of the UNGA, has a working group to find ways in which there's a previous group of governmental experts on space. They gave a report in 2013 and a lot of great recommendations No one actually implemented the recommendations, and they're saying, okay, how do we go about doing that? Let's see. And then finally, a couple things really quickly, and then I'll go to questions, and I appreciate you guys' patience so far. One challenge for space security and stability is overclassification. As I mentioned before, space is just, I would say, almost knee-jerk classified for a lot of issues. And maybe that made sense when there was only a few people with radars able to look up. But right now, anyone with a telescope in their backyard, you can see satellites. And so for me, it's very frustrating that there's this refusal to acknowledge that there are certain satellites because anyone can see them. Like, you don't have to say what they are, but literally anyone can see them. When China did their ASAT test back in 2007, the way it became publicly knowledge information, the amateur satellite observation community saw an object. Next time they saw it, there was a bunch of different objects. And they're like, huh, that's strange. And they alerted the media, like maybe there was something going on here. And at that point, then it became public discussion. Another example I always give, and so the thing that's frustrating, like you can pretend people can't see, but they actually can. I don't know if you guys heard about the Zuma satellite earlier this year, in January. That's a U.S. national security satellite that was launched. It was an intelligence satellite in January. It almost immediately failed. They did an investigation. The most likely was the fairing was supposed to disconnect from the rocket, it didn't work, and so the whole thing ended up in the Indian Ocean. But because it was an intelligence satellite, there's all these conspiracy theories. You know, it's up there, it's behind another satellite, it's invisible, but it's working. You know, they just don't want you to know about it. And so the amateur satellite observation community got really interested in it. There's one guy in his backyard said, I'm going to find Zuma satellite and prove it's up there. He didn't find it. He found a satellite that NASA lost in 2005. It stopped working. NASA's like, oh, well, too bad, so sad, we don't know why that happened. And they just kind of forgot about it because we're moving on. And then they figure the satellite actually went behind the Earth and basically went to the shadow and came out to the sun, and went around again, rebooted, and started broadcasting, but no one knew to look for it, so no one knew what was actually happening until this guy randomly found it. So I always use it as an example of, you know, you can say things aren't up there, but they're up there if you know where to look, and if you're lucky. So I think it's really foolish to overly classify because I think it harms discussions. And then one final challenge for space security and stability. As I said before, space situational awareness is foundational. It helps clarify when intent is unclear. Space situational awareness, or SSA, is the knowledge and characterization of space objects and operational environment in order to support safe, stable, and sustainable space activities. This is done to operate safely and efficiently, avoid physical and genetic interference, detect, characterize, and protect against threats, and understand the evolution of the space environment. As I said, the U.S. military does most of it and shares information. Most space actors do not have the resource capability to provide their own SSA, but many have some national capability that can contribute to a broader effort. And so there's this whole discussion about, well, how do we extend this? How do we make sure we're incorporating data from all sorts of sources so you have a really good, solid SSA picture? So the whole thing that we have a discussion about data exchange standards, I won't go into it, but there's a lot of technical challenges as well as policy challenges. And then the other issue is space traffic management, which can be described as the planning, coordination, non-orbit synchronization of activities to enhance the safety, stability, and sustainability of operations in the space environment. Right now, there's no one actually in charge of space traffic management. There's discussions about maybe we should have someone in charge, maybe it's military, maybe it should be UN, maybe it should be global, maybe it should be Russia. There's no one actively in charge. The U.S. has been providing conjunction warnings, as I said before. There has been, as part of the presidential directive, actually when Trump announced the Space Force, he was actually supposed to announce the presidential directive that said basically the Department of Commerce would be in charge of the publicly facing figure of space traffic management. So that's still being worked out. Commerce is saying, hey, you know, the U.S. military is going to maintain the catalog, how to keep the data about the different space assets, and then we'll just be the ones sharing information. But as you may have heard, in an election, the United States had an election a couple weeks ago. The House flipped, now the Democrats are in charge. The House Democrats don't want Commerce to be in charge of it, they want the FAA to be in charge of it. And so, we'll see what happens. It's still being worked out. But it's a complication. At any rate, Just want to highlight again, responsible property use of space is crucial for spaceflight safety and sustainability of the community. I'd like to end my official remarks with a quote from Scott Pace, the executive summary of the National Space Council he gave last year. He said, "As with past frontiers, it is those who show up, not those who stay home, who create the rules and establish the norms in new areas of human activity." So that's why I'm really happy to have a discussion with you guys, where I was looking at ways in which we can promote these discussions to help promote norms for sustainable use of space.